This week on Kits and Cruising, Richard Hammond drives a classy Jaguar Replica, the Nostalgia XK120, and Bev French gets behind the wheel of the Vindicator Sprint.
Some cars are launched and then just get on with the humdrum business of being day-to-day transport, but others do something more. They catch the public's imagination. Such a car was the Jaguar XK120, so named because of its claimed 120 miles an hour top speed, which was something to shout about in 1948. The car was equipped with the all-new straight-six engine, which saw Jaguar through to the mid-1980s. So it's no surprise that people want replicas of that gorgeous shape, replicas like this one. It's the classic 120 from Nostalgia Cars. The purists have always frowned upon replicas for diluting the value of the originals, but a greater threat came in the form of single-type approval. The test that all kits must pass before they're allowed to get out on the road, and one of the most sweeping rules in those tests is that there can be nothing sharp enough on the car to cause an injury to members of the public or the driver. For instance, on the original 120, this would have jutted out beyond the headlamp, and this would have had a sharp edge to the radius here, rather than rounded off. Now that's a good example of how Malcolm Rolfe and his team of partners have worked hard to ensure the car looks like the original. It is a dimensionally correct replica, but at the same time it's suitable to drive on the roads in 2000. Looking at the demonstrator, the layman certainly wouldn't spot the missing items, and the car looks every inch a classic. Of course, the purists will complain precisely because it's a replica. But once you climb inside, well, you could be in a car from the 50s. They've certainly kept and created the right ambience in here, and that's not surprising because the mainstay of the business is restoring classic Jaguars. And there's nothing for the enthusiast to complain about under there either, because under that half-mile long bonnet, there lurks the classic Jag straight six that you would have found in the original. One area where they definitely haven't tried to replicate the original, thank goodness, is the drive, because everybody agrees the original XK120 to drive is awful, because they weren't particularly good at going or going around corners or stopping, come to think of it. Whereas this uses running gear all taken from the far more modern XJ6. It's got independent suspension, all-round adjustable shocks, it's got proper rack and pinion steering and disc brakes on every wheel, so it's an entirely different proposition. It's actually a bit of a surprise as you drive the thing, because from the look of it, you're expecting it, well, to wallow a bit, not to stop. So it's a great surprise when it works. But it's not really about that. It's not about handling, and it's certainly not about pushing it to the limit. This is a motor car. It's about proceeding in comfort and with style. The entire experience of the car is dominated by that huge bonnet, and it just feels fantastic staring down and just watching the hedges brush by it. Oh yes, I could get used to this. let's be honest. As far as most members of the public are concerned, you're going to be driving around in a real XK120. In fact, the moulds are so accurate that only the purists would know, and even they would have to take a closer look. That said, it's never going to be a bargain basement kit. It's going to cost you about the same to build one of these roadsters as it would to buy an MX-5. But ask yourself this, which one has the most style for your money?
There can be no denying the success of the Lotus 7 has inspired the two-seater kits, although it must be said the average man on the street couldn't tell them apart. But for those who dare to be different, here's the Vindicator Sprint. Although most of you won't recognise it, the Vindicator Sprint has been on the market for over 10 years now. While there's no denying that the styling's controversial, it's beneath the skin that the beauty of this roadster lies. A strong backbone-derived multi-tubular chassis gives a rigid base for the Ford Sierra components to bolt onto. This has led to a reasonable amount of competition success, thus bringing the kind of credibility enthusiasts prefer. Of course, there is one advantage of fitting the full-width Sierra running gear, and that's the space you gain once you climb inside. Although dominated by this wide central tunnel, the cockpit is actually far roomier than most of the competition, and without losing the back-to-basics charm you'd expect. Up front, you usually find 4-cylinder lumps from the Ford range, although the chassis was designed from the outset to take the Rover V8. Bear in mind the potential performance that would give such a lightweight design, and you can imagine this becoming something of a giant killer. Once inside, you quickly get over any doubts you may have had about the Sprint's styling, as the whole thing seems to shrink around you once you're out on the open road. And there's no doubt that the independent rear suspension and the wider than average track give this car a much better ride than most of its rivals. And you certainly get a feel for the competition development that this car's benefited from. The original designer, Roger Lee, was forced to sell the project last year through ill health, and it was taken over by Jon Butler and his partner Alan Taylor. John, what inspired you to take over the Vindicator range?
Well, I came to check out the cars after I heard that Roger was selling, and I took one of the cars out for a test drive. I've owned over 200 cars and driven hundreds and hundreds of cars over the years. I just thought that there's nothing I've ever driven that handles as well as this. And the ride quality seemed to be in a league of its own as well for something that was so well handling.
Now, one of the most controversial aspects of the Vindicator range is the styling. Do you have any future plans, perhaps with your own interpretation, to change any of that?
In terms of the Sprint, I don't really think any major changes are warranted. There may be one or two styling differences that may happen over the next year or two. But basically, to coin a phrase, what ain't boss don't need fixing.
Good answer, I think, there, John. Good answer.
Yeah.
Now, we've not discussed the sister car, the Shadow, which is just parked over there. Tell us a little bit about that one.
Right, that was a car that was designed by Roger's son, Dan, who has helped us out a lot since we took over the business. The idea with that one is that now we've got the Sprint up and running again in terms of sales, we'd like to turn our attention to developing that one a little bit further. We've already had somebody take one kit away. We've got one or two other people interested in them at the moment. We'd like to see that developed and refined over the next year or two. There's also possibilities of other models in the future, but those are for another day.
Right, okay. And finally, how much for a customer to get one of these beauties on the road?
Right, to put together a budget build, I would estimate from bits of feedback we've got, probably around the 4 to 5 grand mark. If to do that though, people would need to be using an awful lot of the bits from the donor, rather than going out and buying any new parts. If they do want to spend a bit more and perhaps put a posh set of alloys on it, spend that little bit extra on seats, go for full weather trim, then they could be talking up into the 5 to 7 grand mark. If they want us to build the car completely for them, then we'd look at somewhere around the 8.5 to 11, depending on what sort of spec they want to go to. But we would use many reconditioned parts and many new parts in that, just from a practicality point of view, instead of having to mess about with cleaning up old bits.
There are those out there who'll dismiss the Sprint because of its unusual looks, but once you get this car out on the road, it's an awful lot of fun to drive, and it makes for a relatively cheap and easy car to build. And at the end of the day, it's all down to personal taste.
Coming up after the break, Penn Roberts tackles the back suspension on the Nostalgia build, so stay tuned.
Whoa, petrol heads, it's progressing a bit, this Quantum build. You can probably tell by the state of the jersey, it gets oilier every week. However, good news, only yesterday my new handbrake cable arrived. Now, you can actually modify your own handbrake cable, but I've decided to get the one from Quantum because I'm not really happy about my own soldering. So this week I'm going to be fitting my handbrake cable, which is a short job, but the great news is I've got my rear suspension complete, and I'm going to show you how to fit the diff and the prop shaft, and that's just for starters. So time's a wasting, let's get to it. Okay, now you may remember me installing this in the car a couple of programs ago. Sadly I've had to uninstall it because you can't actually fit the handbrake cable with the lever in place. So what you've got to do is you've got to feed it up the tunnel, and there's my new handbrake cable down there, going up my tunnel, comes up out of the hole where the handbrake goes and attaches to it through this little tinker here. So I'm going to fit that right now. Okay, this is going to go through that, which I've fed up through the tunnel. Just going to push that in there. Oh dear. Fiddly thing this is. Okay, that's my original pin from my donor. Turn it over. And put a circlip retaining it. Nice and simple. Feed it back down the tunnel. So that in there. Turn it through 90 degrees. Lovely. Put my bolts back in. One. Smashing. Now back to the back of the car, and I can connect them up to the wheel cylinders. No problem. Okay, so the cables are now passing through the tunnel. They're attached to the handbrakes fixed in place. What I've got to do now is to put them into the adjuster brackets at the back. Nice simple job. Here we go. Okay, as you can see, first one's in, fits into these pre-cut laser formed holes here. This is the adjustment itself, so a bit of tension on there, and then just spin that up the cable until one hopes it fits into the hole. Nice, nice, nice. Okay, lovely. and then there's a locking one as well behind it. Brake pipe in the way there. That's good enough for me. And then it's a question of feeding the cable ends out to the wheels. One. Other side. For two. Now the ends of those cables are going to attach to the brake shoes and wheel cylinders. Okay, that's that, simple enough. I'm not going to do that now because I haven't actually got any brake shoes in the drums, so I'll get around to that in a bit. But really what I wanted to do was clear up this back end so that I can proceed to the next little phase, which is putting the differential in, something I'm not particularly looking forward to because it's dead heavy. Okay, so this is my prop shaft, which came from Quantum, comes in the kit. You don't have to send anything away for modification, it comes as a unit, it's already modified. Nice little short prop. All that I've got to do is to bolt this onto the differential, which is down here. That's all been checked, reconditioned and painted, and then all you do is pop that onto the end there. Mates up lovely. Hopefully get the bolt. And oops, nowhere near it. There we go. Pop that in there like that. Tap it up. 3 more of those and you've done the job. Ooh, that was heavy. It says in the book that you should actually get somebody to give you a lift with this, but I believe you can build this car on your own, so I'm going to. Right, so essentially the diff bolts up into 4 mountings which are bushed, and unlike the suspension bushes, these use a different type of bush. This is just a plain rubber bush with a metal insert, which all it does is guide the main bolts through the diff and into the chassis. And a very simple thing, you just grease this up. So, plenty of it on, so it'll slip in nice and easy, and you just pop that into the housing, which is nicely located there. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to spin this round, push it under the car, push the prop into the tunnel, and then lift the diff up so that it lines up with the bushes. So we go. In we go. So the next thing I've got to do is to actually put a little jack underneath this so that I can move the diff up the jack and into place. I've got it in. It's a difficult job to do on your own. I said it before, but it is possible. You've just got to get yourself a nice jack underneath it. Okay, crank it up until you get the diff roughly in position, and then jiggle it until you get it so that you can put the main bolt through the top. Now, if you just come in down here and look at that, there's the bolt, okay, and it passes right the way through the bush on this side, through the diff, and then through the bush on the other side. And it's a huge, great long bolt, okay. Now, further back down there near the tunnel are 2 lead-in bolts, one either side, which a lead-in bolt is a pointed bolt which saves you actually getting yourself in too much of a mess with lining things up. Right, so I've got those in and loose, so all it needs for me to do now is to spanner it all up, which is a couple of 19mm jobs. On we go there. Oops. Up we go here, and with any luck at all, ooh, what a treat. It just bolts up. But now, I'm actually going to pull the drive shafts out and place them inside the diff. Okay, you can see I've done the first side. Just show you how to do the second side. Basically all you do is unbolt the wishbones, but not all the way. You just need one end off, and then the whole thing should move backwards far enough for you to pop the drive shaft in, because it's only on a spline and it just fits up into the diff. So I've done that, I've undone everything there. I just pick the whole thing up, pull it backwards, it round this corner, slide it in to the diff. In it goes. End of story. Rebolt up the suspension. Nice and simple. As soon as I get that lined up. You see, you've done all this already, so you know that it all fits. Okay, that completes more or less the back end. I've just got the one job here to do, which is to pop the handbrake cable through the back plate, ready for connection to the brakes, which I'll do now. That's it. All I'm going to do is put the wheel on, back end finished, no problems at all. Right, so there you have it. Yet another layer of filth, grease and muck announces the end of this week's programme. Next week it's front suspension time, steering column time and a few other odds and sods, including, strange though it may seem, the fuel tank. However, big accomplishment, I've got rear wheels on and I can now move the car about. Until next time, just remember that a day without sunshine is actually night.
Now sadly, next week's Kits and Cruising is the last in the series, but we're going out in style. Remember the Tiger build? Well, Richard Hammond puts on the finishing touches. And we're going to meet some crazy hot rodders, so see you next week.